The first raindrops, the evening had settled over Tokyo like a soft wool blanket, muffling the sharp edges of the day. From the 12th floor apartment window, the city stretched endlessly, its lights blinking against the oncoming night. The first sound of rain was almost imperceptible, a faint pattering against the balcony railing, before deepening into a steady rhythm that filled the room with its soothing persistence. Neon signs blurred through the moisture on the glass, turning the world outside into a watercolor painting of deep blues, warm oranges, and glimmers of green. Somewhere far below, the muffled hum of traffic carried on, blending seamlessly with the rain's melody. Inside, the air smelled faintly of freshly brewed green tea. The kettle had whistled just minutes earlier, and its steam still curled upward in lazy spirals, disappearing into the dim lamplight. Books lay scattered on the low wooden table, their spines worn from years of quiet evenings just like this one. A soft blanket, the color of overcast skies, was draped over the arm of a chair, waiting to be pulled close. The apartment was small, but its coziness was magnified by the storm outside. It felt like the kind of place where time slowed down and nothing urgent could intrude. Down in the streets, umbrellas bloomed like colorful flowers against the glistening pavement. Pedestrians moved with unhurried steps, their reflections shimmering in the puddles. A food vendor's stall steamed against the chill, the scent of grilled yakitori wafting into the damp air. Somewhere nearby, a bicycle bell chimed once, then was swallowed by the sound of tires slicing through wet asphalt. Every small detail of the city seemed amplified in the rain, as though Tokyo itself had drawn a deep breath and was speaking in hushed tones. Back upstairs, the sliding door to the balcony stood slightly ajar, letting in the cool night air. The sound of rain was louder now, almost like a soft percussion section playing a private concert. Beyond the rail, the neighboring apartment buildings glowed warmly through their curtains, tiny snapshots of other people's rainy night lives. Some windows framed solitary figures reading or working at desks. Others revealed silhouettes gathered around steaming pots of dinner. The city felt close and far at once, 1,000 quiet stories unfolding in parallel. The night was still young, but there was no urgency to move, no demand to leave the quiet cocoon the rain had built. A cup of tea sat waiting, its surface trembling slightly, as if shivering from the cool breeze. Outside, the storm promised to last for hours, perhaps all night, offering a soundtrack that could lull the mind into dreams even before sleep came. Somewhere deep within the city's gentle hum, there was the sense that something, or someone, would arrive before the night was over. But for now, the rain was enough. Footsteps in the rain had grown heavier, its patter now a soft roar against the balcony glass. Tokyo's neon colors rippled across the puddled streets like oil paintings in motion. Somewhere far off, a train rumbled by on elevated tracks, its windows glowing briefly before disappearing into the darkness. The tea had cooled just enough to drink, its earthy bitterness grounding the senses in the present moment. Every sip felt like an anchor, keeping the mind steady as the storm swirled beyond the walls. From the balcony, the narrow alley between two buildings was just visible if you leaned slightly to the side. It was darker there, lit only by a flickering lantern above a backdoor entrance to a small restaurant. Occasionally, a lone pedestrian would pass, shoulders hunched against the rain. But this time, it was different. A figure stopped in the alley, their dark coat dripping, their head tilted slightly upward as if looking directly at the 12th floor apartment. The glass caught only the vaguest reflection of their face, but the stillness of their posture lingered in the mind. The figure didn't stay long. They turned, walking slowly toward the street's brighter lights, disappearing beneath a canopy of umbrellas. Yet the faint sound of their footsteps, tapping through the rain, seemed to echo long after they were gone. The apartment suddenly felt warmer in contrast, as though the blanket and tea were not just comforts, but small shields against the vastness of the city outside. Trying to shake the odd feeling, the lamp was turned a little brighter, and a book was picked up from the table, a worn volume of short stories set in old Kyoto. The words came easily, their imagery blending with the steady drumming of the rain. But every so often, the mind would drift back to the alley, replaying the way the stranger had stood so still, as if they belonged to another rhythm of time entirely. Down below, The yakitori vendor's stall still steamed in the rain, and a new wave of customers had gathered beneath its striped awning. Life in the street carried on, untouched by whatever small ripple had passed through this quiet room. But somewhere, out there in the rain-washed city, a single figure was walking away, perhaps toward another story, perhaps toward this one again. A knock at the door. The storm was in full voice now, sheets of rain cascading down the balcony rail, pooling and then spilling over in silver streams. The city outside was a blurred dream of lights and shadow, everything softened by the rain's ceaseless curtain. Inside, the apartment was a small island of warmth, the lamplight casting golden pools across the floor. The sound of a kettle refilling the air with steam was almost hypnotic, the scent of tea and rain mingling like an unspoken memory. It was just after 9 when the knock came. It wasn't loud, more of a polite tapping, but it cut through the rain's rhythm just enough to catch the ear. At first, it could have been a trick of the storm, some loose branch or swaying sign tapping against the building. But then it came again, 3 gentle knocks, spaced evenly. Opening the door revealed the dimly lit hallway of the apartment building. Standing there, water dripping from the brim of a black umbrella, was the stranger from the alley. They were closer now, their features more distinct but still softened by shadow. Dark hair clinging to their forehead, a face pale from the cold, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. In one hand, they held a small paper bag, the top folded neatly. "Sorry to bother you," the stranger said in a voice low enough to be almost lost to the sound of the rain. "I think this was delivered to me by mistake. It has your apartment number on it." They extended the bag, and inside was the unmistakable aroma of still warm taiyaki, the sweet, fish-shaped pastry filled with red bean paste. The warmth from the bag seemed to seep through the fingertips. For a moment, the rain in the hallway and the soft lamplight from inside all felt like parts of the same scene, stitched together by chance. The taiyaki was accepted with a murmur of thanks, but the stranger didn't leave right away. They lingered, their eyes glancing past the door into the apartment, as if sensing the calm refuge within. The rain filled the silence between them, making the air feel heavier and softer at the same time. Sheltering from the storm, the taiyaki bag was still warm in the hands, its sweet scent curling into the air between them. Outside, the rain was so heavy now that it blurred the hallway's far end into a wavering gray haze. A sudden gust of wind rattled one of the hallway windows, sending droplets spattering against the glass. "You might want to wait here a moment," came the words almost without thinking. "The wind's picking up. If you go now, you'll be soaked through." The stranger hesitated, then gave a small nod, stepping just past the threshold. They left their umbrella propped carefully by the door, a faint trail of water marking where they'd stood. The apartment seemed even smaller with another presence inside, but not uncomfortably so. The stranger's eyes lingered on the low table with its scattered books, the steaming tea on the counter, and the balcony where neon colors bled into the rain-slicked glass. "It's quiet here," they said softly, almost to themselves. As if the calm were something rare they didn't want to break. 2 cups of tea soon sat on the table, their steam mingling in slow spirals. The stranger wrapped their hands around one, letting the warmth seep in. They sipped, glancing toward the balcony, then spoke again, their tone casual but deliberate. "You can hear the city better when it rains. It's like the sound pulls everything closer." Their words carried a hint of something. Nostalgia, perhaps, or an unspoken thought they didn't quite share. The rain pressed on the windows, steady and strong, as though it had decided to hold them both here a little longer. In that small room, the city outside felt like a dream, distant, soft, and untouchable. For now, there was only the scent of tea, the warmth of the taiyaki, and the quiet company of someone whose story had yet to unfold. Fragments in the rain, the taiyaki was split between them, the soft pastry breaking open to reveal its warm, sweet filling. The rain beyond the balcony was relentless now, almost theatrical in its persistence. Drops streamed down the glass in hurried paths, tracing and retracing the same trails until they vanished into the puddled edge of the railing. Inside, the air felt thicker, not from discomfort, but from the way silence seemed to stretch comfortably between sips of tea and small movements. It was the stranger who spoke first. "I used to live across the river," they said, glancing toward the faint glow of the Sumida district through the rain-streaked glass. Different place every year, really. I never stayed anywhere long enough to get used to it. Their voice had a quiet rhythm, each sentence measured as though they were still deciding whether to keep speaking. You move a lot? The question slipped out gently, more curiosity than interrogation. The stranger smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach their eyes. You could say that. Work mostly. But sometimes, they paused, rolling the cup between their hands as though warming their fingers could help find the right words. Sometimes you just leave before the walls start to remember you. Outside, the yakitori stall across the street closed early, its paper lantern swaying gently in the wind before the vendor took it down. Umbrellas still dotted the sidewalks, but the crowd had thinned, and the city's sounds seemed to come from farther away now. The stranger's gaze followed those lights and movements as if they carried a story only they could read. The conversation drifted back to safer topics, favorite tea blends, quiet corners of the city where you could still hear your own footsteps. But the earlier words lingered in the air like the scent of rain on stone. Somewhere, under the steady percussion of water on glass, it felt as if the night had decided it wasn't finished with either of them. City between raindrops, the rain softened in the space of a breath, shifting from its steady roar to a gentle, silvery patter. The change was almost startling, like the city itself had taken a long exhale. The sound of individual drops became more distinct, each one tapping against the balcony rail with a delicate rhythm. Somewhere far below, the hiss of tires on wet streets returned, mingled with the faint buzz of an electric sign flickering back to life. "Come see this," the stranger said, rising from the table without looking back. They slid the balcony door open, letting in a rush of cool air scented with wet concrete and distant food stalls. The world outside seemed freshly painted. Neon reflections in the puddles had sharpened, and the skyline glowed against low clouds that caught the city's light. Every building stood in quiet contrast to the soft drizzle still falling. Stepping out onto the balcony, the view was almost surreal. Beyond the clustered rooftops, the Tokyo skytree pierced the mist, its lights shimmering faintly in the damp air. Somewhere to the west, a rooftop garden was still lit despite the weather, its greenery swaying gently in the breeze. The stranger leaned on the railing, looking out, not scanning, not searching, just absorbing. "It's strange," they said after a while. "From up here, you can almost believe the city's listening. Like if you spoke out loud, it might answer." They turned their heads slightly, as if testing the thought, but whatever they were searching for stayed unsaid. In the glow of the balcony light, droplets clung to their dark hair, catching the reflections of the street below. The two of them stood in companionable silence, the drizzle soft against their faces, the warmth of the apartment at their backs. In that suspended moment, the city felt like it was holding them in the palm of its hand, close enough to touch, yet impossibly vast. And though neither mentioned it, there was a quiet certainty that this night, in all its rain-soaked stillness, would be remembered. The lantern in the rain, they lingered on the balcony, watching the street below like a slow-moving play. The rain had thinned to a faint mist, the air cool enough to carry scents upward, grilled meat from a cart a block away, the faint sweetness of wet flowers from a florist closing late. Somewhere down the street, a delivery scooter purred past, its red tail light briefly slicing through the puddles before vanishing around the corner. Then, as if carried on a private wind, a single paper lantern drifted into view. It bobbed above the street, swaying gently, its pale glow flickering with each breath of the damp night. The thin paper shimmered under the neon signs, turning from white to pink to gold as it floated past shop fronts. It wasn't tethered to anything, no stall, no awning, just moving quietly through the air as if it had lost its home. The stranger leaned forward over the railing, following its slow descent. "That's odd," they murmured, almost to themselves. "You don't see these loose around here, not in this weather." For a moment, the lantern's light reflected in their eyes, and they looked younger somehow, like a memory had touched them. The lantern drifted lower until it caught briefly on the edge of a gutter 3 stories down. Then, with the next gust, it rose again, only to brush against the wall just beneath their balcony. It hung there, trembling, the faintest pattern of red kanji visible on its side. Neither of them reached for it, though it would have been easy to lean out and grab it. The moment felt too delicate, as though touching it would break something unseen. When the wind finally carried it away, disappearing into the narrow dark between two buildings, the silence that followed was different, deeper, charged with a sense of something unfinished. The stranger straightened, their gaze still fixed on where it had vanished. "I think I've seen that pattern before," they said softly, but they didn't explain further. Words beneath the kanji back inside. The warmth of the apartment felt almost too sudden after the damp stillness of the balcony. The tea had cooled, the last of the steam gone, but neither of them seemed in a hurry to refill the cups. The rain's rhythm had returned to a soft whisper against the glass. As if it too were listening in, the stranger set their cup down with quiet care. "That lantern, the writing on it. I'm almost sure it was from a place I knew. A tea house, though calling it that makes it sound too proper. It was small, tucked away in an alley like this one. My grandmother used to take me there when I was little." Their gaze had gone somewhere far away, following the memory instead of the words. What happened to it? The question was gentle, the kind asked when you're not sure if someone wants to answer. The stranger's lips curved into a faint, almost rueful smile. "It closed years ago. The owner was old, and no one took over. I thought everything from it was gone. The lanterns, the teacups, even the low wooden counter." They paused, their voice dipping softer. But seeing that lantern tonight, it felt like it had been carried straight from that time to here. For a moment, the room seemed wrapped in the scent of another life. A place where rain tapped on paper screens, where steam rose from cups painted with the same red kanji they'd just seen. The stranger's eyes lingered on the balcony as though hoping the lantern might drift back into sight. Instead, the city outside continued its quiet glow, unbothered, unknowable. And yet, the night had shifted. The rain no longer felt like a simple backdrop. It had become a thread, stitching together two people and a past that was now brushing against the present. Somewhere in the streets below, perhaps the lantern had landed, waiting for someone else to find it. The street below the rain had eased again, leaving only the occasional drop to slide down the balcony glass. The city seemed to pause with it, as though catching its breath. Somewhere far below, a voice called out, a sharp, sudden sound that carried up the narrow alley. It wasn't angry or frightened, just urgent. The stranger tilted their head, listening. "Did you hear that?" Their voice was soft, but it carried a note of alertness that hadn't been there before. Another sound followed, a faint clatter, like wood striking stone, then the brief flash of movement under a street lamp. From the balcony, they both leaned over just far enough to see the source. A small object rolled slowly to a stop in the shallow puddle near the alley's mouth. Even from here, the glow was unmistakable, the paper lantern. Its light was dimmer now, but the red kanji still bled softly through the wet paper. Neither of them spoke at first. The stranger's gaze lingered on it, unreadable. Then they turned toward the door. "We should go get it before it's gone again," they said simply, as if the decision were obvious. The suggestion felt strange. How many people would step out into the cool night just for a drifting lantern? But it also felt inevitable that a moment later, the apartment door clicked shut behind them, and they stepped into the damp hallway together. The air was cooler outside, carrying the scent of rain-soaked concrete. Down the stairs, the city's quiet hum surrounded them, the kind that only comes when most of the shops are closed and the streets belong to the night. The lantern still waited, glowing faintly, as if it had been expecting them. The last light, the puddles rippled softly under their steps as they crossed the narrow street. The lantern lay tipped on its side, its glow dim but steady, like a heartbeat refusing to fade. The stranger crouched beside it, lifting it with both hands as though it were something fragile and alive. The wet paper clung to their fingers, but the red kanji, elegant, familiar, was still clear against the warm light within. For a moment, they didn't move. They simply stood there under the street lamp, the rain's faint mist haloing the glow of the lantern. "It's lighter than I remember," they murmured, almost smiling. "Or maybe I'm just heavier now." The words hung in the air, carrying the weight of more than they revealed. They carried the lantern back through the alley, the two of them walking side by side. The city's sounds felt softer here, as if they'd stepped into a quieter layer of Tokyo that few noticed. Outside the apartment building, the stranger paused, holding the lantern between them. "I think it should stay here," they said. Some nights, it should be allowed to drift until it finds the right place again. Back inside, the lantern was placed on the low table, its glow mingling with the lamplight until the room seemed warmer than before. They sat again, not speaking much. There was no need. Outside, the rain began once more, steady and patient, as if it had been waiting for this moment to return. Later, when the stranger finally left, the apartment still smelled faintly of tea and rain. The lantern remained on the table, casting its soft, amber glow across the room. And though the city beyond the balcony was endless, it no longer felt quite so far away.